Okay, we're going to get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving and have fully recovered from it. We usually try to shoot for these webinars to be around 30 minutes. Today, the goal is 45 because we have extra speakers. I'll talk really fast to try to save us some time. But the first thing I'd like to do is to thank the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation for the funding that's making this webinar and the previous webinars and the future webinars possible. So thank you to them. Just a quick note about today. The idea for this is, 2020 is approaching, and during my time at Brookfield Zoo, this is a time of year where our budgets were set, and then we were looking for activities and things to become involved in, or events to join or participate in, and all similar things. So we wanted to try to do something along those lines to give you all some ideas about what might be out there that you could get involved with. And hopefully, there'll be some connections that can be made here, and some folks will be participating in things that they hadn't previously thought about. So with that, let me just move to the agenda real quick. It's great to have a bunch of speakers. You will not hear my voice as often as you have in past webinars, but Jennifer Keaton with AZA will give a sense of what they're looking at from their congressional and government affairs viewpoint. Kim McIntyre, who many of you may know, is a director of the Aquarium and Conservation Partnership, and she'll be sharing what they're up to. And then Bill Mott, who's the executive director of the Ocean Project, will talk about a number of the programs that we have. And I should, first of all, identify myself as the policy advisor to the Ocean Project. And then I wanted just to remind folks, we try to do these on the first Friday of every month, these webinars. When there's a holiday around that time, it gets pushed back, which will be the case with our next webinar, which will be on January 10th. There's a lot of work in the conservation community of trying to really elevate the impact of oceans from climate change. And there's a real effort in that side of the advocacy street in 2020 that's going to come, and we wanted to give folks a briefing on that. So we hope you can join us on January 10th. So, like I said, I will talk really fast, and I'll start off with just a quick recap of what has happened in 2019. And I'm not going to get into the weeds and the big picture and all of that other stuff. But what a lot of times happens in Washington, where I live and work, is you hear all the noise about big issues, but you don't see some things that are notable and under the radar. And one of the things that happened early this year, which was really a carryover from the last Congress, was the passage of the John Dingell Act, which was a omnibus bill of public lands and environment and conservation provisions. And there was one in here that was, oops, that's the wrong one. The circle should be the reauthorizing the Multi-Species Conservation Fund, which is a program, a series of programs within that, and some related measures that are new, that are programs that are not necessarily big dollars in the DC perspective, but a lot of zoos and aquariums can participate in and have. The circled one was also important, especially if you're if you're on public parklands and were built after, say, 1965. There's a good chance that the Land and Water Conservation Fund helped your municipality or county acquire the land that you're sitting on. The LWCF is the primary land acquisition program. So for all federal public lands, when the government acquires money, that's where it gets it from. And it's been a year-to-year and underfunded program for a number of years. It is funded by royalties from offshore oil and gas drilling. You see the Neo-Migratory Bird Conservation Act, which is very important for a lot of migrating species and things in places we care about in the zoo and aquarium community. There are dozens of other similar provisions in here. So it was a not well reported bill, but a very important one. The next significant thing is what's been happening with the Democrats assuming control of the House of Representatives and the Natural Resources Committee. They literally, anything they do, they talk about climate and its impact on it. So climate change, at least in the House of Representatives, is front and center in the main committee of jurisdiction over the environment and conservation of wildlife. This fall, the Water, Oceans, and Wildlife Subcommittee started a nationwide series of listening sessions, which is developed to help them develop a rewrite of what's called the Magnuson-Stevens Act, which is the main federal fisheries management statute. It hasn't been reauthorized or amended in 20 years, and there's a lot of interest in and I think agreed upon need from both sides of the aisle, industry, conservation, and others. Interestingly enough, 3 of the 4 listening sessions have been at aquariums, and those are the ones that are pictured to the right. I know that there's some other aquariums that have been talking or trying to host other ones. I think it sort of gives a great sense of this can be a very contentious issue, but sort of the neutral and safe platform and environment, aquariums in this case, and zoos in the other cases, provide for discussions, productive discussions, and by all accounts, these meetings have gone very well and have been very productive. There will be 3 or 4 more of these next year. They're done for the year, and locations are to be determined, but I think New England and the Gulf Coast are at least 2 of the 3 that they're looking at. The other thing at the very bottom there is associated with Magnuson-Stevens is a forage fish management bill, which is an attempt to get forage fish for the first time managed under the Magnuson-Stevens framework. There's a lot of concern in various communities about overfishing and depleted stocks in this area. And I think it's an issue that could be of interest for zoos and aquariums because you guys who have animals, a lot of animals feed off of forage fish, especially marine mammals and others. So it creates, I think, a potentially great messaging opportunity. And the Ocean Project and others are collaborating on this and may have some joint actions that you might be able to help us with and take in the future. So big picture in 2020. Sorry, I know this is a little more than 2 minutes. The House has passed over 400 bills in 2019. The Senate has not acted on very many of them. 270 have received no action. And that's because the Republicans who control the Senate, their top priority is they're trying to fill every last judicial vacancy that they can. That's taken priority, and that means a lot of legislation has fallen by the wayside and why it's referred to as a legislative graveyard. Jen Keaton will get into funding bills and appropriations in a little bit. The overview here is none of the 12 appropriations bills Congress is supposed to pass and the president signs have been enacted yet. So the entire government's working on something called a continuing resolution, which is a temporary funding bill. It expires, as you see, on December 20th, which is right around the day the House is likely to make an impeachment vote. So that it can be very complicated on both ends, and who knows exactly what will happen with funding. Nobody anticipates a shutdown, especially around the holidays. So this issue on appropriations is going to spill over to 2020 is the common wisdom. You see, unless you're living under a rock, you haven't sort of heard about what's likely to happen with the impeachment of the president, the process, the trial, and the result, which seems to be predetermined. So there it is on there if you've just gotten out from under the rock. And then last thing, as you know, next year is a presidential election, and a third of the Senate and all the House will be up for grabs. As the year goes on, and it won't take too long, this is going to begin weighing into what happens in Congress. And if at one point one party believes they have the distinct advantage, such as the Democrats think they're going to take the Senate, anything is really going to grind to a halt because they'll want to do it when they have control. There may be some stuff that gets through because a Republican chair sees it coming, and in this example wants to get some stuff done while they still have a little bit of leverage. So without question, next year, the election, which will be contentious, is going to eventually factor into what's going on here. Okay. And then finally, these are some important days and events that we see coming up. I think the three highlighted ones are really great opportunities to come to Washington and meet your delegation and spread the word. When you come to Washington, you're real people. People listen to you. You get better meetings than a DC guy like me, and it sends a message to your delegations about your commitment to it. But you can see all these other events in here are also very good, and also the 50th anniversary of Earth Day provides a great opportunity too. And then of course our monthly webinar series. So at this point, I apologize for going a little long, but I want to turn it over to Jennifer Keaton from AZA. One of the great things that happened about 10 years ago at AZA is they hired Jen, and it really allowed them to spread their focus area. And Jen has been building a really great presence on Capitol Hill and in Congress, and really representing all of you very well, and working on a great agenda, which she will now talk about a little bit. So Jen, it's all yours. I think I need to unmute you, if I'm recalling, and let's see.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Bill. Thank you to the Ocean Project for giving me a few minutes to highlight a few of AZA's legislative priorities for the coming year. So next slide. Thanks. So as many of you likely know, the Florida Reef Tract is currently experiencing a multi-year disease-related mortality event that has resulted in massive die-offs in multiple coral species. AZA and many of its members are assisting in restoration through the Florida Reef Tract Rescue Project by creating land-based nurseries to home corals removed from the reef tract to further study for relocation possibilities. So one of our legislative priorities, the Restoring Resilient Reefs Act, would, among other provisions, support coral conservation and restoration efforts by authorizing federal funding, supporting enhanced assessment and reporting procedures, and authorizing new avenues for emergency funds to help with reef emergencies, including disease outbreaks, invasive species, and coral bleaching. So I'm happy to say that bill has passed the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, and there is a House companion to that bill. Next, the Save Vanishing Species Semi-Postal Stamp benefits the multinational species conservation funds at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Those are the funds that Tom mentioned earlier, having recently, or in the past year, being reauthorized. Those funds benefit conservation projects for great apes, rhinos, tigers, Asian and African elephants, and marine turtles and freshwater tortoises. So there are bills in both the House and Senate to direct the U.S. Postal Service to continue selling the stamp until all stamps are sold. And that's a semi-postal stamp, so it's sold at a little bit higher than the first-class rate, and that extra bit of money is what goes to Fish and Wildlife Service for those funds. So the House has passed that bill just in the past month, and we are hopefully going to be able to get the Senate to do the same. And so we will be vigorously working on that going into next year. I also want to mention that the House has recently passed H.R. 737. This is the Shark Fin Sales Elimination Act. And this bill would make the possession, sale, and purchase of shark fins illegal acts in the U.S. That bill also has a Senate version, S877, which has also passed that Senate Committee on Commerce. And I also want to mention that we will continue to work with partner organizations to defend the Endangered Species Act. AZA does support legislation, the Paw and Fin Conservation Act, which would restore ESA protections that were recently rolled back by the administration. And so building on the success of existing conservation species preservation efforts, SAFE, Saving Animals from Extinction, was launched by AZA and its members to provide urgent leadership and action to prevent mass animal extinctions. Currently, there are 24 species meeting the criteria for becoming a safe species, with more species expected to be approved in 2020. So this is a great opportunity for any AZA members joining the webinar today to get involved directly with other AZA members and AZA in creating more safe species and working on the extinction crisis. So I want to mention that AZA does have a robust legislative education center, which includes action alerts for the bills I've just mentioned, as well as many other bills that AZA is supporting. So you can go there, AZA members or the public or anyone really, to express support for these bills and to find out the bills that AZA is supporting. And I also want to mention, as Tom said, we are tracking appropriations very closely. This is a all the time annual event. So AZA supports several different programs and a few bills. So there's ESA recovery, museum grants, NOAA and EPA environmental education programs, marine mammal rescue and rehabilitation, and among other wildlife conservation programs. So we are waiting to see what will happen with FY 2020. Hopefully they will get that done here in the next month if we're lucky. We've been pleased with the numbers we've seen, I think, in the House and Senate marks. Hopefully those will carry through to the final product. But as this is an ongoing process, we will be looking to get going on FY 2021 in January, whether or not FY 2020 is concluded. So we will be also including more on that, hopefully, on our Legislative Education Center once we start those efforts in January. So next slide, please. And so I want to just reiterate two of the advocacy opportunities mentioned earlier. So first is Museums Advocacy Day, which takes place in February. This is a great opportunity to network with peers from across the country, hear from federal agency and nonprofit leaders, and to build professional skills. AZA has been a partner with AAM and other organizations for at least 9 years now. So anyone participating today, if you are at an AZA facility, feel free to reach out to me. I know my contact information is on the screen there. There are rates to get you a discount and things like that. So definitely encourage folks, if they're able, to come to DC for that. And then finally, I want to highlight our own Advocacy Day and Capitol Hill reception, which will be on May 19th and May 20th. We're still working out the agenda for that. We'll have advocacy-related opportunities on both days, with the 20th being the day that attendees will do their House and Senate meetings, and that day culminates with our very large congressional reception, which, as always, is held in the Rayburn House Office Building. And we are developing a landing page for information on that at the AZA website under the Government Affairs tab. So if you're interested in attending, please reach out to me or keep checking back to that page on the website for more information. And so with that, I will turn it back over to Tom.
Great, thanks, Jen. And one thing I neglected to mention at the very beginning, on the toolbar for Zoom, there's a Q&A section that's identified. If you have questions, feel free to put them in there. We'll be checking on them, and we'll answer them as they come. Or at the very end. There's also, if you look at there, at the toolbar again, under the More tab, there's a chat section. So if that's another place if you want to have a conversation with those of us that are on here. Okay, so I apologize for not doing that at the beginning. If you have any questions, now you know how to ask them. So next I want to turn it over to Kim McIntyre, who's the director of the Aquarium and Conservation Partnership. They have been doing great work, and Kim has really done a great job at sort of getting a lot of diverse agendas and partners focused in one direction. It's been impressive to watch since it was formed. And I know, I mean that. It's not, you can't say herding cats when you're working on ocean issues, but I don't know what the equivalent is. But Kim's been doing a great job.
I'm herding fish.
Okay. So yeah, before I get myself into trouble, it's all yours, Kim. Just let me know when you need a slide moved.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tom and Bill and Jen, for giving me this opportunity to give a quick overview of the Aquarium Conservation Partnership and what our plans are for 2020 and beyond. So next slide. Oh, you can skip the slide too.
Okay.
Thanks. So for those of you who don't know, the Aquarium Conservation Partnership is a voluntary collaboration of AZA nonprofit aquariums. It was started as a pilot project in 2016, and the vision is to use the collective power of aquariums to increase ocean and freshwater conservation impacts. Next slide. So right now, we have recently launched as a permanent conservation agenda endeavor. We started off, as I said, as a pilot in 2016, which was extended for 2 more years in 2018, so we could really test the model, and just announced at the AZA annual meeting in New Orleans that we're a permanent partnership now, fiscally sponsored by Monterey Bay Aquarium. So we're actually doing a membership drive right now for 2020 and beyond. We currently have 21 partner aquariums and growing. As I said, we are open to AZA accredited nonprofit aquariums, but this December we are getting together with the executive committee and leadership to look at whether or not we want to open up membership criteria beyond nonprofits. And the reason we started off with a small membership to begin with was really to be able to be small and nimble and to, like I said, test this model. Next slide. So since we've launched in 2016, we've helped increase public recognition of conservation leadership of aquariums, create opportunities for aquarium action on conservation issues with the help of organizations like AZA and the Ocean Project, and really to help develop new capacity for aquariums to accomplish long-term conservation impact. One example is that I think 6 of our member aquariums, since we launched in 2016, actually created new policy programs and positions for policy experts at their institutions. Next slide. So 2016, actually these have been the conservation goals since 2016. They were adopted in 2016, rolled over to 2018, and we are reassessing what our conservation goals for 2020 are going to be, but they are going to be very similar, if not the same as these. So our primary goal between 2016 and 2019 has been to reduce the sources of ocean freshwater plastic pollution. Our other goals have been to increase ocean and freshwater ecosystem protection and to improve the sustainability of fisheries and aquaculture. So the next couple slides, I'm just going to go through a few examples of what we've done under each of these goals. For protecting ecosystems, some of our focus areas have been defense of the Marine National Monument Program and National Marine Sanctuaries. And I think Bill is going to talk a little bit about the work we're doing with the Ocean Project on the National Marine Sanctuary Program. We have also defended offshore oil, gas, and seismic testing. We have spoken out against rollback for protections under the Clean Water Act. And now we are also looking to focus some of our capacity on coral reef restoration. Next slide. We've also worked closely with the Ocean Project on our goal to promote sustainable fisheries and working under the Seafood Watch umbrella. So that, of course, has been advocating for strong reauthorization of the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act. And also we have a protection of shark and ray species under this goal. So CITES listings and other shark and ray protections. Next slide, please. And then finally, our primary goal has been reducing plastic pollution. We did start off, there wasn't much policy aside from local and state policy when we first started off on this goal. So we did focus on some consumer campaigns, which I think many of you have seen and been familiar with. Our member aquariums also made collective business commitments to significantly reduce single-use plastic in our institutions, and that's been greatly successful and used as a model for international aquariums and zoos. We do a lot of coordinating on sharing best practices with our policy folks on state and local policies. And now a lot of our hard work and the work of many organizations have been paying off. And now we're starting to see some really significant federal plastic policy reduction legislation that we're going to be following over the next year or two. Next slide. So just to give you an example of the high-level consumer campaigns that we have worked on, our first campaign was In Our Hands, and that was really to raise the issue of plastic pollution to our audiences and ways that our audiences could reduce their use of single-use plastic, and also highlighting what aquariums are doing with this issue. Next slide. And then, of course, the straw bandwagon that we got on, and that was more activating our audiences to take action. So last year, we did have another consumer campaign called First Step, where we actually reached out to not only our consumer audiences, but also businesses. And we have over 600 businesses who joined our member aquariums to stop using single-use plastic straws. Next. So what's coming up in 2020? As I said, the executive committee is meeting at the New England Aquarium in a couple weeks to discuss our conservation action agenda, where we lay out our conservation goals, activities, and outcomes. And so, like I said, I think we're still going to focus on our 3 main conservation goals, and we're also going to adopt a climate goal. As Tom said at the beginning of the webinar, climate and ocean linkage has really risen to the top with the ocean and freshwater conservation NGO community. And so we definitely want to see how aquariums can lend our unique voice to that. We're going to continue and deepen our policy work, and we're also going to move to smaller campaigns. So while we had our big consumer campaigns on plastic, we're going to move, like I said, to focus on more different areas, incorporating social media work and visitor engagement with the Ocean Project. As Bill will show, that there's a couple different engagement activities that we and our aquariums have been active in, and we hope to continue doing that and providing best practices beyond ACP. So I think is there another slide, Tom? Yes, so if you are interested, like I said, our membership right now is open only to nonprofit aquariums. And so if you are a nonprofit aquarium eligible for membership right now and you're interested in more information, please go ahead and contact me. For those who are not within that criteria, like I said, we are looking at either opening up membership, or we might be able to have different campaign assets available for our members or aquariums and zoos beyond the ACP. So we will keep you posted as that comes. And we are working closely with AZA and the Ocean Project to also have a bigger impact beyond our members. So I'm happy to answer any questions in the Q&A, or my email, I think, was at the beginning of the slides. So thank you so much, Tom and Bill, for giving me this time.
It was. The one thing I would say is on some of the joint actions that Kim alluded to, that the Ocean Project and ACP and AZA have collaborated on, there's opportunities to at least sort of join a sign-on letter or similar vehicles on some of these issues. So even if you don't fall within ACP's membership criteria, we work together a lot, and we try to cast a broad net. Again, a bad analogy on this slide, but you know, to sort of give folks an opportunity. So we'll do that. I did see a question that popped in. I will get to that in just a little bit, but I want to move it on and introduce Bill Mott, who will introduce the cast of characters you see there before throwing it back to me. Bill is the founding executive director of the Ocean Project, which I think has been around since, well, I was going to make the founding of the Republic, but about 20 years, has done some great work, and I'll let him talk about that. And then Baylee and Douglas can talk about some of the great work we're doing as well. So Bill, it's all yours. Thanks, Tom. And I'm not quite that old. It was about 23 years ago, and it was co-founded by several aquariums in AZA and an NGO I was working with at that time. But and thanks, Jen and Kim, for joining on this session today. It's great to have you both again. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. So I've been given credit for talking about a bunch of stuff today that I'm not going to. Douglas is going to be speaking on the points that Kim was mentioning on visitor engagement at our zoo and aquarium partners, and he is in upstate New York. Baylee Ritter is going to be following me. She's our youth coordinator based out of Chicago. She'll be talking about our youth initiative. And I will be talking about World Oceans Day today because we just hired this week Jeff Demain based out of LA. But he's too fresh to do this, so I'm going to get him on a future webinar in 2020 for you all. Anyway, I'm in Providence, Rhode Island. We're a virtual organization, as I think many of you know, but we've been around for 20 plus years, helping zoos and aquariums advance your conservation missions and
Tom, if you could go ahead to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about World Oceans Day. We started back in 2002 as a fun way for zoos and aquariums to get visitors engaged at the beginning of the summer season here in, well, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. And it quickly grew from 0 events in the United States back in 2002 to 25 events the next year, with I think about a dozen zoos and aquariums participating, to over 2,000 events this past year in 140 some countries. So it's been growing really rapidly, and we've been trying to make it all about conservation action, celebrations and action for our ocean, no matter where you live. You can do something in Kentucky, you can do something in California, you can do something in Kazakhstan, and everything is connected, as we all know. So whatever you do in a positive sense for conservation really does ultimately end up helping the ocean. Early on, it was really a single event. It was in some ways a one-off, mainly because of bandwidth issues. But over the last several years in particular, we've really focused on making World Oceans Day a rallying point for the world. It's kind of like having an anniversary if you have a significant other or a spouse. Not that you don't love them the rest of the year, at least I hope not. And it's the same thing with the ocean. It's a special celebration of the ocean. It's a time to join together with people around the world in all sorts of different communities and backgrounds and really make a difference collectively. So we've been working with hundreds of zoos and aquariums the last couple of years in the United States and around the world. I think this past year we had over half of AZA members participate in some form or fashion with World Oceans Day. Might not be called World Oceans Day. In some places it's called World Ocean Day. Some places it's called World Ocean Week. And in the United States for the last 15 years, because of World Oceans Day, it's been, June has been proclaimed by the president as National Ocean Month. So yeah, together we're basically, working with all sorts of sectors, zoos and aquariums obviously being our sweet spot for over 20 years, but all sectors, recreational, tourism, corporations, businesses, schools, universities, and try to really make it as much about and for young people as possible. If you could move to the next slide, that'd be great. So this is an image of the planet. Shows you the geographic breadth of our events. It's not that Russia is full of thousands of events. It's not. It's only a handful of events in Russia, so that's a big part of the map. But regardless, it's a significant number of events in a significant number of countries, and it's growing rapidly every year. Social media is not covered on this map, but it's huge, and it's just growing bigger. So it's really, zoos and aquariums have kudos to you. You guys helped start this and make it a big thing. It's getting to be a huge thing. We have really exciting plans I'm going to get to in a second here, but it's a really exciting opportunity to really rally your audiences, your publics, and your communities, and join together with others around the world to make a difference. Next slide. So I mentioned Jeff DeMaine is our new World Oceans Day manager, started this week. So he's not on this, but he should be on this as a highlight for positive changes coming in 2020. Jeff's a very strategic guy who's going to bring a whole new dimension to World Oceans Day for us and for you. We also have a brand new website that's going to launch next month. And with that, we're going to have a new logo. So stay tuned for that announcement in a few weeks. We also are expanding our efforts by we hired a social media manager earlier this year, Gloria Castanova. She's a wonderful addition to the team, and it's going to be helping amplify your efforts around World Oceans Day, Earth Day, Endangered Species Day, and all your other conservation activities as much as we can. I will not talk too much about the Youth Advisory Council, other than say that your next speaker, Baylee Ritter, was on the first cohort of the Youth Advisory Council back several years ago when we started it. She was actually a Youth Advisory Council member at SeaWorld. That's how I first met, and stayed in touch with Baylee ever since. So she can talk a little bit more about the YAC, the Youth Advisory Council, but we have 25 superstars from 21 countries this year, and lots of plans ahead. And then there's always going to be many more opportunities with aquariums and zoos. We're still in the works with something we're planning this year in the United States that could become a fairly big deal. We're working on a couple of different fronts with that, with some corporate partners. And we're always interested in working with our zoo and aquarium partners, especially in the United States, in your communities and your cities, to broaden your efforts. If you want to grow, citywide events, we're more than happy to work with you to connect our network of organizations. We have a couple thousand organizations beyond the zoos and aquariums we work with, obviously, but Watershed Association, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, churches, places of worship, sporting teams. There's all sorts of different partners. Like I said, World Oceans Day is really, it's across all sectors. So it's a huge database to tap into if you're so inclined in your city or your community. Next slide, please. And so thank you to all the zoos and aquariums on the call, and if you're getting this recording later on in the future, for your participation in World Oceans Day. But I'd like to give a real extra strong shout out to our supporters. These are our zoo and aquarium supporters who have provided financial contribution to us, from small amounts to big amounts, and every amount matters and goes a long way with our team. So thank you very much to all our supporters. And I will now pass the baton, the virtual baton, to Baylee Ritter in Chicago.
Thanks so much, Bill. Yeah, like Bill said, my name is Baylee Ritter, and I'm the youth coordinator for the Ocean Project. As youth engagement has somewhat become a buzzword over the years for many outside groups and different companies, I think it's always really important to explain the why of youth engagement before we dive into youth engagement initiatives at the Ocean Project. Next slide, please. So in 2010, research conducted by the Ocean Project really emphasized the importance of engaging younger generations in conservation. The findings showed that youth not only had a higher level of awareness of ocean-related issues, but also a higher likelihood to modify their behaviors and engage in advocacy than adults. And it also found that aquariums and zoos are viewed by youth as the best source of information about ways to protect and conserve the ocean. So in short, the research really highlighted the need for organizations such as all of yours to engage young people in conservation efforts, and more specifically in the conservation efforts at your organizations and institutions. But how to engage young people isn't that simple. Thanks to funding from NOAA, which you can see in that second column, the Ocean Project was able to award partner zoos and aquariums approximately $300,000 in grants to develop innovative, local, and regional ocean conservation solutions and stewardship initiatives, a bulk of which was dedicated to helping you all engage youth specifically. So while the research showed in that first column really emphasized the why and is still really the core of why we do what we do, the Innovative Solutions Grants Plus program, which is in that middle column that I just referenced, really got at the best practices in engaging youth in a really meaningful way. And if any of you have experience in working with young people, you know that they're the first ones to call something out when it doesn't feel authentic and it doesn't feel meaningful. So that grant program really allowed our different zoos and aquariums that we work with to find something that really worked for their young people. And just in case the Ocean Project wasn't clear enough in our stance on youth engagement, we've been featured on and actually coordinated several AZA panels on the importance of young people. And I can throw those names for the 3 different years plus in the chat if any of you are interested. But this past year, I was really fortunate enough to be one of several amazing youth mentors on the panel called Empowering Our Youth, Giving Passion a Platform at AZA in New Orleans. And so I just want to get right into the next slide, which talks about how all of that, the why and also the how has really led us to form really, really 2 strong and strategic youth initiatives that highlight and include a lot of your awesome young people. So on that left, as Bill was mentioning, the World Oceans Day Youth Advisory Council, which I'm extremely humbled to be able to coordinate this year after kind of coming full circle as a council member myself, is actually a wonderful and global network of 25 young people from 21 countries. And we continue to look every year for youth associated with ZAMs to join the World Oceans Day Youth Advisory Council. This next year, council members are developing campaigns and events to target individual behavior and action for community and societal change for both June 8th, World Oceans Day, but also year round. So really be on the lookout for these great resources and campaigns in the new year developed by youth for youth. That's really the core of everything we do is really wanting that connection between all young people so we can really enhance efforts. And then on that right-hand side is See Youth Rise Up, which several of your institutions might have had a youth be one of our See Youth Rise Up delegates. But this past June, we welcomed our 4th class of See Youth Rise Up delegates who are actually now being tapped for other opportunities throughout the year, including being the featured keynote speakers for the Clean Water Celebration on Earth Day in Peoria, Illinois in 2020, which is really exciting. And like I said, we're always trying to look to you all to find kind of those next leaders, you know, to find the next group of young people who can really take conservation and youth engagement to the next level. So we hope to continue to grow both programs and connect even more of your youth from your organizations 365 days a year, which is a growing sentiment I hear from both youth and youth coordinators from organizations around the globe. Next slide for me. So if you are interested in advancing youth engagement at your organization or simply want to know more about upcoming plans, please connect with me if we haven't already connected. We have some really exciting plans for 2020, and we all would love to talk about how we can collaborate more on youth engagement to better connect, unite, mobilize, and activate youth for our blue planet. And if anyone is just more or just wants to brainstorm some more on how we can provide more seats at the table for young people, let me know. I would absolutely welcome and love any conversations with all of you about youth engagement and you know the year ahead. So thank you all for this wonderful conversation. I've been super inspired by all of the panelists and presenters on this today. So with that, I think I'm turning it over to Douglas Meyer, or maybe Billis.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Just start right in, Douglas, because we're running a little short on time. I think most people know you, and I did a brief overview of what you do.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Just 2 quick things, and really how you can get involved going forward into 2020. The first is we have, as Bill alluded to at the beginning, I work with the Ocean Project as a strategic advisor on the public engagement campaigns. And we had some really great results working with many of you. You can see the logos across the bottom on engaging visitors in support of fisheries policies, which showed that people are not only willing to get engaged, we had a remarkable 23% of those who were asked to sign a comment card to Congress. Even in this time, after a 2-minute story, 23%. And if you compare that to the rates you all get on like an email campaign or something, that's just incredible. And those that we asked to take action had much in exit surveys showed beyond doubt that they had a higher awareness and support for the issues, and also better opinions about the good work aquariums do and zoos do in conservation, with higher net promoter scores, meaning they were more likely to recommend a visit. In 2020, as Tom mentioned at the beginning, we're looking at Congress to pull up the fisheries issue again. And we're gonna need, if you go back just this last slide for a second, we're gonna need a really strong show of public support. So we've got this down to a formula that you can adapt and implement. And we're gonna desperately be looking for aquariums and zoos to help us get the word out when Congress is considering this, because typically when it comes to fisheries policy, they only hear from certain special interests. They're not hearing from the broader swath of the public, and that's what they see in our visitors. So please, please, please reach out to us and let me know if you'd be interested. We can show you the results, and there's a good formula that you can adapt to make your own. And if you go to the next slide, Tom. And then as Kim alluded to, that work we did on fisheries policy got the attention of the Packard Foundation and their Heartwired to Love the Ocean report, which I encourage you to look at if you haven't already. It has some good information on and advice on engaging the public. And what we're going to try to do with this is really what we've been funded to do is to look at, in using a similar engagement, how does that play across the full array of visitors? In our prior work, we've pretty much looked at those who received conservation ask or messaging and ask versus those who did not. This time we're going to be looking at those who received the conservation messaging and looking for differences between are based on age, gender, race, ethnicity, and what we refer to as mindset or motivation for the visit. So these 4 aquariums, and we got this grant in conjunction with Kim, as Kim mentioned, with the Aquarium Conservation Partnership. And 4 of the ACP members are going to be helping us do that field testing. And once again, we'll share those results out with everyone. And really, this is going to look at, one, the sanctuaries issue we see a lot of potential around, but 2, just a little bit of assurance and testing ourselves to make sure that we're not leaving anyone out when it comes to the messaging we're using. So those are 2 opportunities for other aquariums and zoos to get involved over the coming year. And please, again, just reach out to me and let me know if you're interested, and happy to share what we learned as well as the formulas we used.
Great, thanks, Douglas. And I will just finish up, but this is the last slide, so we are almost to the end. Let me just make a comment about, to add the comment that Douglas made about the usual suspects weighing in on Magnuson-Stevens Act. And what he means by that is the fishing interest in the conservation community. And our guests and members sort of fall in the middle of it. They're not the typical membership of the environmental community, which Douglas and I come out of, which is basically over 45 and white. It's younger, it's more diverse, and in this day and age of tracking everything, they don't show up in a congressional office's database of people who are constantly talking to them about whatever membership group has asked them to weigh in. To give you an example, also to add to Douglas's report on fisheries, the engagement project, Mystic Aquarium and New England Aquarium partnered together on it. They collected cards from 135 different congressional offices, which I think shocked all of us. So it shows the reach and potential that zoos and aquariums have to harness a conservation movement and to foster it along. And I think sometimes we underestimate our ability and impact. What that says is, you think you're getting people from your community, but depending on what time of year you're doing it, you may be getting people from around the country, and you have a much larger ripple effect. So my piece as the policy advisor to the Ocean Project is to help people understand how to do that. Hence the webinar series. We had a great boot camp, advocacy and engagement boot camp at the New Orleans conference. We're looking to do it again in other places at appropriate times, and are open to individual training sessions at zoos and aquariums. So feel free to contact us if you're interested. And then the other thing we try to do, as you see on this webinar today, is to link you to issues and events and potential partners on various issues. Obviously, with a name like the Ocean Project, our focus is the health of our oceans. And then I'm also available for any pro bono advice that you may need if you're sort of new to this game about how to go about doing it. And I'm happy to do it. I've done it a number of times. And so feel free to reach out to me. I should say that a PDF version of all of these slides with everyone's contact information will be up on the Ocean Project website, theoceanproject.org, in the next day or two. So if you want to follow up with anybody, that's an opportunity to do it. I did answer the question on that somebody had about the Recovering America's Wildlife Act, which is a bill to put a lot more money into the management of game and non-game species. It's bringing together conservationists, environmentalists, and sportsmen and women to sort of increase the amount of money available to manage habitats. My information on that, the person thought it had passed the House Resources Committee. I understand it's only been had a hearing at the subcommittee level, but I would assume it could pass pretty quickly out of the Natural Resources Committee. And then it just becomes, can they move it on its own, or would it be something that gets lumped into a larger package of bills, such as the John Dingell Act, which is where we began. So thank you all for joining us today. Sorry we ran just a few minutes late. I encourage you to follow up with anybody who spoke on and about their programs that you might be interested in. And again, just one more time, thank the Gordon Betty Moore Foundation for the funding for the webinars that we do, and encourage everybody to join us on January 10th for our next one on engaging and elevating the impact of climate change on our ocean. Thanks a bunch. We'll stick around for a few minutes to see if there are any questions that folks have. We hope everybody has a great, peaceful, and safe holiday season, and we'll see you in the new year on January 10th. Thank you, everyone.